There is a version of you that exists only after everything falls apart. You haven't met her yet, but somewhere inside the person reading this, she's already waiting. Some people walk into a room and you can't explain it, but you feel it. A stillness, a weight that isn't heavy, just present, like they know something about life that hasn't been taught in any book. What you're sensing is real, it has a name. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what it is, and maybe recognize it in yourself. Picture someone ordinary, someone who shows up to work, replies to texts, laughs at the right moments. Nothing about them looks broken. And yet, 3 years ago, their entire world collapsed in a single afternoon. A relationship they built their identity around ended without warning. Or a diagnosis rearranged every plan they'd made. Or a betrayal came from the one person they never thought to guard themselves against. The details change. The wreckage feels the same. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. That collapse didn't just hurt them, it reprogrammed them. Pause here for a second. Think of a time your whole sense of the world shifted overnight. Not a bad day, a before and after moment. If nothing comes to mind yet, keep listening, because it might. Extreme emotional pain doesn't behave like ordinary sadness. Ordinary sadness passes through you and leaves you mostly intact. This is different. This reaches underneath the personality you built and pulls out the load-bearing beliefs. The belief that people who love you will stay. The belief that effort gets rewarded. The belief that tomorrow will roughly resemble today. When those beliefs get torn out all at once, you're not just sad, you're disoriented. Familiar rooms feel foreign. Your own reflection feels like a stranger's. Some survivors describe it as watching their life from outside a window, unable to get back in. And underneath all of that, a much scarier question starts forming. If the thing I built my identity on is gone, who exactly am I now? Most people never say that question out loud, but it's there, at 3 in the morning, in the space between exhaustion and sleep. Here's where the story usually gets it wrong. It skips straight to the comeback, the glow-up, the empowering montage. But there's a stage before any of that, and it deserves to be named honestly. It's the shattering. No strength arrives before this. No wisdom shows up early to soften the blow. First, everything you thought was solid ground gives way, and you fall through it. Think about what that shattering actually looks like in an ordinary week. It's not one dramatic scene. It's forgetting to eat until 3 in the afternoon. It's rereading the same paragraph 5 times because your mind keeps sliding off it. It's standing in a grocery store aisle, gripping a cart, wondering why something as simple as choosing bread suddenly feels impossible. This is what psychologists sometimes call functional collapse. The bills still get paid, the job still gets done, but underneath that surface performance, a person is operating on almost nothing. There's also a specific kind of exhaustion that comes with this stage, one that has nothing to do with sleep. It's the exhaustion of translating yourself for a world that hasn't caught up to what happened inside you, answering "how are you" a dozen times a day, choosing each time whether to lie a little or tell a fragment of the truth to someone who isn't ready to hear it. That constant translation is its own quiet labor, invisible to everyone except the person doing it. What happens next is the part almost nobody expects. Something in the nervous system, in the psyche, quietly starts working, not to fix the pain, just to help the person keep existing inside it. Researchers who study trauma have a term for what sometimes follows: post-traumatic growth. Not because the pain was good, not because suffering deserved to happen, but because the human mind, pushed past its old limits, sometimes reorganizes itself into something more capable of holding weight. Think of a forest after a wildfire. The ground is black, everything visible is burned. And yet, months later, green pushes up through that same scorched soil. Not the same forest. A new one, grown from altered ground. That's the closest image to what happens inside a person who survives something they thought would end them. The strength that comes afterward isn't bright and shiny. It's quieter. It carries the scar tissue with it. It is strength born in ruin and forever shaped by it. This explains something people misunderstand about resilience. Resilience doesn't come from the pain itself. Plenty of people go through devastating things and come out more fragile, more guarded, more shut down. Pain alone doesn't build anyone. What builds a person is what happens next. whether the experience gets processed or whether it gets buried alive. When it's buried, it resurfaces as fear dressed up as caution, or numbness dressed up as being fine. It shows up as flinching at a phone notification for no clear reason. It shows up as agreeing to plans you don't want, just to avoid the discomfort of disappointing someone, because disappointing someone once cost you everything. Unprocessed pain doesn't disappear, it just changes its disguise. But when a person is able to sit with what happened, even slowly, even imperfectly, something shifts. The chaos starts to organize itself into a kind of knowledge, not comfort, knowledge. I survived something I thought I couldn't. That sentence, once it's true for you, changes how you carry every future hard thing. Pause again for a moment. Think of the hardest thing you've already survived. Not the thing you're afraid of, the thing you already lived through. Notice that you're still here to think about it. That fact alone is data. Your nervous system has already recorded it, whether your mind is caught up yet or not. There's a second shift that almost never gets mentioned, and it might be the most human part of this entire process. Emotions stop being simple. Before deep pain, joy is just joy. Sadness is just sadness. Afterward, everything comes with layers. A survivor can feel genuinely happy and, in the same breath, aware of how quickly happiness can be taken. They can feel relief and grief tangled together, because relief often shows up right where a loss used to live. This isn't a flaw. It's an upgrade in how closely someone can read the emotional world, in themselves and in everyone around them. That's why survivors so often become the person others quietly gravitate toward, not because they give perfect advice, because they can sense distress before it's spoken. They notice the pause before someone says, "I'm fine." They've lived inside that pause themselves. A friend goes quiet in a group chat, and they're the one who texts privately, just checking in, no pressure. Not because they were taught to, because they remember exactly what that silence used to feel like from the inside. Take a slower breath here. Ask yourself honestly, has pain ever made you more patient with someone else's pain? If the answer is yes, you already know exactly what this feels like from the inside. Something else changes, something almost philosophical. Before real betrayal or real loss, most people carry quiet assumptions about human beings. That loyalty holds, that love protects, that the people who say they care will act like it. When those assumptions break, survivors don't usually become bitter, though it might look that way at first. What actually happens, over time, is more precise. They stop expecting perfection from people. They start seeing others as capable of both love and failure, sometimes in the very same week. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. And clarity, strangely enough, makes it easier to trust again, because trust stops being blind and starts being informed. This is also where a quieter kind of grief lives, one that rarely gets named directly, grieving the version of the world you used to believe in. Not just the person who hurt you or the situation that fell apart, but the entire framework you once used to make sense of things. Some survivors describe this as harder than the original event, because there's no single moment to point to, no clear ending. Just a slow, private mourning for a kind of innocence that isn't coming back. And yet, on the other side of that mourning, something sturdier tends to take its place. Not innocence, something closer to wisdom. There's a related shift worth naming on its own. The quiet death of a particular kind of identity. The one built entirely around a role. The devoted partner. The reliable one. The person whose whole sense of worth was tied to being needed by someone else. When that role disappears overnight, whether through abandonment, loss, or betrayal, it can feel like losing a name you'd answered to for years. This is sometimes called identity foreclosure, when a person's sense of self becomes so tightly fused to one role that its absence feels like the absence of self entirely. Survivors who make it through this particular collapse often emerge with something valuable, an identity that no longer depends entirely on being needed, wanted, or chosen by someone else to feel real. Alongside that clarity comes something survivors rarely get credit for: boundaries. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that shows up as noticing, almost instantly, when a situation is draining you, and no longer overriding that signal just to keep the peace. This isn't coldness. It's self-trust, earned the hard way. Once you've proven to yourself that you can survive rupture, you stop needing to prevent every possible ending in order to feel safe. This shift often surprises the people around a survivor before it surprises the survivor themselves. Friends notice a new steadiness in how they say no, a calmer refusal to explain themselves 5 different ways just to be believed. It doesn't come from confidence in the traditional sense. It comes from something quieter and more durable. The simple, lived fact of having already survived the worst version of being let down. Here's the part that sounds like a contradiction until you've lived it. Strength and sensitivity grow together, not apart. The same person who can stay calm during a crisis might also feel a small distance from a friend more sharply than they used to. That's not weakness creeping back in. That's a nervous system that's been taught, the hard way, to notice things early. Pain didn't harden them, it sharpened them. And if you've ever felt both steadier and more tender at the same time, you weren't imagining a contradiction. You were describing exactly what this process looks like from the inside. There's a version of this that shows up in how survivors love, once they're ready to again. It's rarely the guarded, closed-off version people expect. More often, it's careful in a different way. Slower to fully trust, yes, but also more attentive, more able to notice the small signs that someone is safe. They read effort more accurately than they used to because they've learned exactly what its absence feels like. Love, for them, becomes less about grand gestures and more about consistency, because consistency is the thing that broke last time. There's also a side to this that rarely gets airtime: hypervigilance, the part of the nervous system that keeps scanning for danger long after the danger has passed. A slightly delayed reply, a change in someone's tone, a plan that shifts without explanation. For a survivor, these small things can trigger a disproportionate alarm, not because they're overreacting, but because their internal alarm system was calibrated during a period when small signals genuinely did predict something terrible. Learning to recalibrate that system to tell the difference between an old echo and a present danger is some of the quietest, least celebrated work a person can do. It rarely gets a montage. It deserves one anyway. None of this ends with a person going back to who they were. That version is gone, and that's not a tragedy, it's just true. What actually happens is closer to reconstruction. First, the collapse. Then a long stretch of just getting through the hours, because the nervous system doesn't have room yet for meaning-making, only survival. Then, slowly, a search begins. Not for an explanation of why it happened, but for a place to put it. Where does this belong in my story? What does it say about who I am now? That search is where the rebuilding actually starts. This reconstruction rarely moves in a straight line. There are days that feel like real progress, followed by a single smell, or song, or offhand comment that pulls a person right back to the beginning. This isn't failure, it's simply how healing actually behaves, in contrast to how it gets portrayed. Growth after pain doesn't move like a staircase. It moves more like a tide, forward, back, forward again, each cycle leaving a little more solid ground than the one before it. One thing that quietly accelerates this rebuilding is self-compassion, which is different from self-esteem. Self-esteem asks whether you're good enough. Self-compassion simply asks whether you're being kind to yourself in the middle of something hard, regardless of how well you're handling it. Survivors who eventually find steadier ground often describe a specific turning point, the moment they stopped treating their own pain as a personal failure and started treating it as something that happened to them, not something that proved anything about their worth. That single reframe, small as it sounds, tends to open the door to everything else. The boundaries, the clarity, the willingness to try connection again, all of it becomes easier once the inner voice stops functioning like a prosecutor and starts functioning like a witness. Eventually, if that search is given enough time and enough honesty, integration happens. The pain stops being the entire story. It becomes one chapter, folded into a longer one that includes everything that came after. The person doesn't erase what happened. They just stop letting it be the only thing that's true about them. One more pause here, because this next part matters. If you're in the middle of this process right now, not on the other side of it, you are not behind. There is no schedule for this. The tide comes in and out on its own timeline, not the one social media suggests you should be following. And here's the last thing, maybe the most important one. After all of that, after seeing exactly how badly things can fall apart, most survivors still choose to stay open. They still let people in. They still hope, even knowing hope isn't guaranteed to be repaid. That's not naivety. That's a quiet kind of courage most people will never fully notice, because it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It looks like someone simply choosing, again, to care. Maybe that's the real definition of strength people have been reaching for all along. Not the absence of fear, not the absence of scars. Just the decision, made quietly and repeatedly, to remain someone capable of connection, even with full knowledge of what connection can cost. If any part of this felt uncomfortably familiar, that's not a coincidence, and it's not something to be ashamed of. It might be the shape of your own strength, one you're still learning to recognize. If that's true for you, you're not carrying it alone. Stay a little longer, subscribe if this found you at the right moment, and if you want, leave a word below about what you rebuild after your own collapse. Someone reading it might need to know it's possible.
Like to learn more about human psychology? Like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe my channel now. Thank you for watching.